Welcome to the Upside Down podcast, where each episode we discuss a question that's come up in our journeys with Jesus and his upside down kingdom that we want to understand God's ways in. Join us as we seek God's heart together. Showing start, man.
Well, that's good.
Okay, so
We're here.
we're back. Yeah, welcome
here
back
we
to
Come on.
another episode of the Upside Down podcast. So excited to be here. I've been using ChatGPT recently. You can call me a sinner if you want to, but I've been doing it.
I'd say so.
And so last episode I talked about how I felt like a dad sitting around thinking about icebreakers. But now I'm just a lazy bum because I typed it into ChatGPT because it has better ideas.
Probably better
It's
ones.
way
yeah.
more creative than I am. Okay,
Still not gonna top last week.
No. So I don't think
or last time.
learning your Taco Bell favorites
Yeah.
still gonna stand high.
You were
up there
very
for me.
excited about
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
His response. Ooh, that was just so
I
good.
did not expect
Yeah,
that.
that was good stuff. But so this week, here's what I'm curious about. If you had to pick an actor to play you in your autobiographical film adaptation, it's a film of your life, who is the actor you would choose to play you and why?
So I have an immediate response to this. I don't know
So
why.
you've thought about this before?
I mean, I might have. Okay. He's the same height as me. We're equally as good looking and equally as ripped. Zac Efron. He is the same height as me, so
yeah,
he would.
that
he'd be
checks
good.
out.
Yeah.
He's as tall as you.
Yeah. 5'8", yeah. Oh,
He's
shoot.
5'8".
I'm 5'9".
On the
Which is
record.
almost 6 feet.
On the record.
almost
Almost
6
6
feet.
I'm just below 6 feet.
Dude, I always thought he was shorter than that. I always thought he had the Bruno Mars vibe where it was like,
like
I
5'2".
tell everybody, I tell everybody the, like five, or the Tom Cruise thing where everything's shot to make him look taller than it actually
right. Yep.
is.
Dude, I remember you remember the Uptown Funk music video?
Oh, yeah.
I was like, how did they find these short dancers to make Bruno Mars
look so
look like
tall.
he's normal height?
Yeah.
And they always had what was the other dude that actually like produced the song? Mark Ronson or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
He was always sitting down in the music video because he's like 6 foot something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was the award show where he was standing next to Taylor Swift and everybody was like, oh my
Goodness.
We should
why is that man so
Yeah,
small?
we should answer this, but then someone else should say, "Here's who I
Oh,
think
yeah.
would play you."
Okay, so I said what I think. What do you guys think? You guys are going to say like Danny DeVito or something.
Juan, you can share what you think first.
For Ceddie?
Yeah.
For me.
Actually, maybe like it's actually you know Severance has been on my mind, but maybe I think you I did think recently, but I don't remember now of like who was your. Didn't I tell you who I thought you looked like?
The Severance guy? The dude that was in Parks and Rec?
Yeah. But that's not who I said.
What's
But
that guy's name?
that's who's coming to mind
forget
now.
his name.
It'll come to me. Ben? No. Yeah, Ben Scott. Ben Scott.
Oh, yeah.
Ben Scott.
It's something
Is
with
that
a
his name?
Scott.
It's Adam Scott. Adam
Adam
Scott. Adam Scott. So I'll go with
Just
that.
keep firing them off.
No,
We'll
it's
get one
Adam
of them.
Scott. It's Adam Scott.
No,
Yeah.
his name's just Scott.
Yeah.
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 I feel like you kind of have a Paul Ruddy look to you.
Ooh,
Paul Rudd.
interesting.
Yeah,
Handsome
but like
man.
He's a
I
handsome
agree.
man.
I think Paul Rudd is handsome, but he's also pretty whimsical in everything he's in.
Yeah.
And you have a whimsical personality.
You guys want to hear something funny?
I do.
That's my mom's celebrity crush.
Paul Rudd.
Straight up. No cap.
Great. That's great.
Oh, that's good, man.
Very relevant.
Yeah. Wow. Hey, dude, shout out to
Shout out
your
to my mom.
Shout out to your mom.
I'll
Suzanne.
go.
Big Paul Rudd.
man.
So
fan.
I always want to say like one of the actors that I admire and that's like really good looking, like Ryan Gosling or something. But honestly,
The short
to be
guy.
like accurate to like my personality and it'd probably be like a younger Jack Black.
You think?
I would
that
like
works.
a younger Jack Black.
I cannot help. Forgive me in advance. Nacho! That's immediately where my brain
Yeah. I love him. He's like a little too heavy now, but
is, yeah.
but around nacho time or something like that.
Not Minecraft movie.
I'd go with no.
Was he in the Minecraft?
They're coming out with one.
Oh,
Yeah,
terrible.
It's
Jason
out.
Momoa has
It's out,
bangs
yeah.
and a pink leather jacket in it. So
Yeah.
That's good.
yeah.
You got anyone in mind for me? Well,
Dude.
don't say George Lopez.
That's mine one.
When you accidentally fall asleep at like 11 o'clock, you wake up, it's 3 a.m., something's on the TV, and it's just always the George Lopez
Yeah, right.
show.
Low rider.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Oh, goodness.
Well, that was my picks.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll pick
man.
another one.
Yeah.
I think John Mayer.
Juan
I
Mayor.
think
Juan
that was-
Mayor.
Juan Mayor. I think so. Yeah, that's funny. George Lopez, dude. Honestly, I have no idea. I'm not like super familiar with actors. I think if I was to go on personality, yeah, I agree. Jack Black, I think fits.
Yeah.
But I think
Talented man. He's a talented man.
he is, dude. You ever seen him on the saxoboom?
Yeah, bro.
Because he kills it. Yeah, he kills it. Yeah, he kills it.
Or maybe Pitbull.
Not with this hair, bro.
Yeah, that's true. You got beautiful locks. It's great.
Mr. Worldwide. That's what they
Yeah.
say.
What's
it's
yours?
305.
If I was to pick somebody to play me, if I was to say someone who I wanted to do it, if you're like you were saying accurately, no, I don't care about accurately. I would love to have Timothée Chalamet play me. He's the big dog right now.
He
you know?
is. Tim.
I still can't get the scene from Dune out of my mind where he's in the siege and he had just like discovered his identity and he's just screaming at them and he's like, "My name is
Powerful.
Paul." It's just epic. He's
Powerful,
so good.
yeah.
Yeah. He's killer, man. So
But
I
he's
think
like
also
he's
whimsical.
physically the complete opposite of you, though. Physically.
you think?
I think he's short. He's short.
No, he thought he was tall and thin.
No,
Thin,
I
very
think
thin.
he's
Tall?
he's probably 6 foot plus.
6 foot.
So are you saying I'm thick?
Let's look it up.
Because
Well, he's a
I'll
little
take that.
bit. He's definitely he's
Have
lankier
you seen him
than
lift
you,
up
for
his
sure.
pant leg? It is like really.
I actually have not seen him lift up his pant leg.
He showed it.
One.
He did it in a video.
Yeah.
But I would say for you, another one just came to mind. Actually, I think that one's even better. I would say for you, like a Vince Vaughn.
Oh,
Vince
I like
Vaughn.
Vince
Yeah,
Vaughn.
heck yeah, he's the
He was-
man.
yeah, he was
I
the
love
man.
Vince Vaughn, bro.
He had such a good stretch.
Yep.
He was in everything. You ever see Four Christmases?
Then he came out as conservative,
Yeah.
and his career tanked.
yeah. But
Yeah.
Dude, Four Christmases was great. We watched that every year. Yeah, that movie's good.
Yeah.
Dude, I don't.
It's okay. It's okay.
I mean, Timothée Chalamet's good. Who's the dude that did that SNL skit with him? Pete Davidson.
Pete Davidson. You never
loved me, Mom.
Yeah. Oh man. That's so funny.
Any tall person, you know.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. Or Alan Richson.
I don't know. I have no idea who that is.
Reacher.
Oh, is it Jack Reacher?
Yeah.
Sick.
Just
dude,
like-
for sure.
Just because of how yoked you are. You know. I want to look up how tall Timothée
Dude, apparently
Chalamet.
he's a Christian too.
Yeah, he
I don't
is.
know about that.
Yeah.
Oh, you judgmental.
I says I don't know about that.
Yeah. No, I hear you. But
I don't know him. I don't know him like that.
Yeah, I don't know. But that's hilarious. That's so funny, man.
Oh yeah, he's like 5'10", Timothée Chalamet.
Is he?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, he's so skinny. He seems like he's tall.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Matthew McConaughey would be up there as well. Not that you're asking
All
for
right.
extras.
No, yeah,
but
sure.
Dude, I just everything about him. You know what I mean? Because he got
Lincoln.
put through the ringer of like I'm the rom-com only guy, and then he comes out and just kills it with serious roles, like in Interstellar.
Great actor.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
He's so good. So yeah, he's great. So
Nice.
I'm a fan.
Good question. That's funny.
I appreciate that. ChatGPT actually. So that's where the credit can go.
Chad.
Chad
GPT.
Chad.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So do either one of you fellas feel especially moved or motivated to
Yeah. I'm happy to go first.
Yeah, dude, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Yeah, if you've never watched before, what we do here is each of us ask a question about something that's been on our minds, on our hearts, and so that's what we do. We just kick that around. So, I told Ceddie, I'm pivoting So this isn't really like something super profound or even necessarily biblical, but it is something I'm curious about. And I'll ask the question, and then you guys will need a second to think about it, I'm sure. So I'm happy to answer first. But my question is this: can you share a really like a work of art that has either taught you something or like really shaped you or just like stuck with you? So this could be a song, this could even be like an artist and their whole body of work, a movie, a TV show, a book, anything, any piece of art that really like taught you something or like shaped who you are. So I'll go. If you have one, you can go. If you need some time.
Yeah.
So mine is it's gonna shock you if you've even heard of it.
My Little Pony.
So it's a movie that came out in 2007. When I tell you the plot, this is what's gonna shock you. It's called Lars and the Real Girl. It stars Ryan Gosling. It's an independent movie that he made after The Notebook, which is crazy because he went up here with The Notebook and then made this movie where he's the lead and he's a guy that falls in love with a sex doll.
Fascinating.
But
We're going to have to bleep that out
there's
to get the monetization.
And this is why the movie does not get a lot of attention because people, it was even hard to market. How do you market this? If you look at the trailer, it's like this quirky comedy, and that's not really, the movie's funny, but that's not what's at the heart of it. He's a deeply psychologically troubled man, and there's nothing sexual with the doll. He really, it's an illusion in his mind that this is his girlfriend. He's a very lonely individual. It's set in somewhere in the northern United, like Minnesota or something like that. And it's, first of all, his acting is superb. But I saw the movie once and it always stuck with me. And recently I rewatched it for this movie podcast that we do. We reviewed it. It got all 5s, which is the best scores we give. And it moved me just as much. Like I wept, man. It brought me to tears because it's so beautiful about how, and it's actually, what's fascinating is I forgot this detail. It's actually a Christian community that then in this small town, that how they respond to him, because it's his girlfriend. She's a real person. He brings her to church. He comes up with this whole backstory for her, like, so she can't walk because she's an adult, so she's in a wheelchair. Right, so he wheels her around. He takes her introduces her to people. So in this small town, people are like, and he lives with his brother. He lives in the garage with his brother, and like the scene when he like brings her over, his brother's just like stunned, and people are like, "What is this?" And they're like, "We didn't realize he was so sick." So then it plays out with him like going to therapy and everything. But it's like how this community surrounds him, how they decide to deal with it, like not by shutting him, or being like, dude, get this guy away from here. Because they don't all, think about how they're processing this. Like they don't know his life. So you see someone with a doll like that, you think they're up to the worst, right? That's immediately what you think. But they have so much affection for this guy that they just embrace him. And it's like the opposite of how you think you would or should react. And for me, I think the movies that I love the most have these direct parallels to faith. And so it speaks to me so much because it's a reflection to me of how I think about certain people, right? Where I don't want to think I am like this, but I am, and I do have these biases and I do make these judgments. And it's not because I'm a terrible person. Like, I grew up in a Hispanic family. Hispanic people, for the most part, are like really conservative. not politically necessarily, but like socially and in their values. They're very conservative. So we grew up in our family with people who just looked like us, and they were like kind of like straight edge people. There were no like, you know, people full of tattoos or like, you know, who just lived completely different from us. And so that, you know, rings in my mind of like, how do I react, especially as a Christian? You know, we want to think like, yeah, the Bible says accept everyone, but when someone really different shows up at your church, you know, are you the first one to like embrace them and go up to them, and or are you like, you know, why is that person here? You know, like someone smelly, someone, you know, who doesn't have a home, you know, whatever the case may be. And so it makes me think about that a lot, and just realize that you know, again, that I need to surrender that to the Lord, that I need to not think that way, not judge people by what's on the outside, and try, you know, again, in surrendering that to Jesus, the hope is to be able to see people the way that Jesus does and accept them and love them. And we know there's you know, God doesn't leave us the way that he finds us, you know, or the way when we come to him. But yeah, like how do we respond, you know, as a community and as individuals to people who really challenge our beliefs and the things that we know, you know, and our notions. So it's an excellent movie. I recommend it.
It's called Lars and the
Lars and the Real Girl.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy, man.
It's
You really throwing me for a loop with this. You know?
I was not. None of that was where I expected it to
know.
go.
It's like, oh, great question, and then you just go into this spiritual, incredible thing about a dude and a doll.
I could say this. I could also go on the same rant about the movie Arrival, but
I was gonna say that you were gonna say Arrival, but I was like, I'm gonna let him.
Denis Villeneuve.
Denis Villeneuve.
But this one is
Also director of Dune, by the way.
Yeah.
Shout out to our boy.
Yeah.
But this one is it gets even less attention, and I think it's like such an important film, especially if you're a Christian. Like, you should watch this movie and just take in what this man is going through, how his community embraces him, and then how that transforms him. It's so beautiful.
I'm curious to why like Ryan Gosling wanted to do that project.
I mean, the main answer that comes to mind is like he probably didn't want to be typecast, because dude, at the time when The Notebook came out, everyone had seen The Notebook. Like it was the movie of the year pretty much. I don't remember what other movies came out that year. But so he went from like, you know, this side role on Remember the Titans to like The Notebook, and it was like heartthrob, lead guy, you know? And then maybe he just didn't want to be typecast. But also up until recently, where he's done like a lot more mainstream movies, around that period, he was just doing like a lot of independent films where it's like you could tell he's just drawn to the character or to the story. Yeah. And that's always what like appealed to me about him. Yeah. You know, now he's doing more mainstream stuff, but he's always been kind of like that, you know. But yeah, it's a very interesting choice, man. Like right after The Notebook to do that. It could have been a career killer if the movie was not so good, and it works, and they treat the subject so well, where it's like it's never raunchy, it's never inappropriate, it's always very sensitive and delicate. His acting is incredible in that movie, man. Like it's probably the best role he's ever done. So Lars and the Real Girl.
That's high praise. La La Land's my favorite. It's my second favorite movie ever, only underneath Forrest Gump. Yeah. And a large part of that is because of the job that Ryan Gosling did. He's the man. The fact that he learned jazz piano for that film. Just unbelievable. He's just like, he's a stud in that way.
Ryan, if you're watching, we love you.
That's super interesting, man. Like, it's interesting the direct parallels to life in the church now, because there's a study done once by a seminary professor who was teaching his students about the parable of the Good Samaritan. And as they were learning week after week, he decided one day he was going to put a person who was in actual distress on the way to class from where the students lived to where they were going, and none of them stopped. At least like the vast majority, right? Pretty much nobody stopped to help the guy who's on the side of the road. And they're learning about this parable Jesus is telling about what it takes to be the kind of person who is living how he calls them to. And I think that connects directly to like church life, but outside the walls of the church, what is our heart towards other people? And why are we so quick to assume the worst, in other people? I think that's an interesting route to take. I mean, Ryan's a super smart guy. So I love that it like plays on that, because we do that. I don't know about you guys, but I am way too quick to assume the worst in somebody, So if you think about yourself in those shoes, what would I think if somebody strolled into our church with a doll in a wheelchair, and they had this relationship with it? Would it be compassion and grace, and meeting them where they are?
I think about that with like the trans issue, and then like homosexuality in the church too. Dude, I remember like walking into a gas station one time, and these two dudes that came out, and they were like getting in their big lifted truck, and they're like, "What the F is up with that guy?" And I walk in, and it was this trans kid that was behind the register and stuff, painting nails and all that, whatever. And you could just see like their face was just so downtrodden, and it's like, man, I don't ever want to be like that, to really like, this kind of took a different direction, but like, it really makes you think like, shoot, like if someone like that came into the church, would we be loving? Obviously not condoning, but yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about.
And it makes me like sad and like fear in a way. Like I've been in the church life, and yet I feel like I've to the point where it's like, like I don't know. I that I would respond.
Yeah.
And the way that I would act.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to like kind of be hard on yourself, but I don't think it's a me thing. I feel like it's like it's a culture thing, like, and that's what I see as the problem. There's some churches that do a really great job with like outreach and like with being welcoming to outsiders, and there's some that aren't, unfortunately. And so that's why for me it's like the movie is like this big billboard of like, here's this beautiful example, does that reflect reality? And like my fear is like that so many times I'm like, it's not. But when you read the Gospels, it's like it totally should. And so it's like now I'm in a world where I'm like, I don't even know how to respond, how to connect with someone. Yeah. That's, completely different. Yeah. Except to like go back to what I had from childhood, which is like to self-preservation, like to see people as a threat. I think that's the thing. Yeah. Right, is you see people who are different and who look different or whatever, and your immediate response is like self-preservation, like this is a threat. Yeah. Rather than like
empathy, compassion,
exactly.
Any of the Christ-like qualities. Dude, that's true, man. I mean, there's a book by a guy named Jonathan Haidt, and it's called The Coddling of the American Mind. And one of the things he talks about is how humans are so inclined to tribalism, and we naturally will just create in-group, out-group like tension, where we want to have the people who we belong with and have those who we don't belong with, and then create, some kind of issue, right? But that plays exactly into it. When you see somebody who clearly needs help or is not walking in the way that Jesus calls us to, we have a choice in those moments. And the choice is either I could live like my flesh and retreat from someone who's different from me, or I could answer the call of Christ and step in and love them where they are, because that's always what he did. And he met them in the midst of their brokenness, and he called them to a higher standard, but also he did it through the means of having a relationship with them. You know, he was like considered a glutton and a drunkard by those who didn't actually know him, you know, like the religious leaders of the day, because he ate meals with people who were different from him. You know, so if we were the kind of Christian people who, like, if people in our church found out we had, you know, like a lot of people who don't know Jesus over who were all gay and trans, what do you think they would say about us? You know? Like, what do you think the perception would be about what kind of sympathizer you are? Like, but that's the perception. Jesus was, like, not in support of those things, and yet he was in support of those people, you know? And so he, like, was trying to meet them where they are.
Yeah.
It's a convicting thing, you know?
Yeah, because the other thing, I don't mean to take up so much time on you guys haven't even
one
gone
response
yet.
with one question.
But the other side of the coin is, outside of the church, society is making us more callous toward the other, right? Just look at cancel culture, right? Oh, you did something wrong, we can just like toss you out. And some people have done terrible things, but you hear it with teens all the time, right? Or this idea of like this toxic person, I gotta get rid of this toxic person. And like, yeah, there's a line, like, you know, but as a Christian, like, I don't really think that's supposed to be our mentality just because someone's difficult, or, you know, I don't think Christ is doing that. Like, he's like loving people. But I think there's a lot of messages, and we've talked about what's happening digitally and all you know, that people are not as connected. And so I think as human beings, as a species, we are becoming a lot less empathetic and a lot more callous. You know, Ceddie just had, and Sarah just had this thing where they witnessed this terrible accident the other day, and they got out and helped. Like, it made me question, like, would I have stopped and like gotten out?
Yeah.
And
I
like,
almost didn't. I was like,
right.
We were on the way to an event, and
Even
it's like, we're gonna be late.
Even just that we're accustomed to seeing horrible things, so we're more callous to that, to pain. It's like, it's crazy what's happening, and thank God for Jesus, right? That he helps us with that. But
thank God for Jesus.
I love that phrase. Thank God for Jesus.
But it helps to have art like this that, you know, makes you reflect and be like, wow, what a beautiful depiction. And, you know, how does that reflect?
Yeah. It's sad to think that at the forefront of artistry used to be Christian people, and it's not anymore. Whether that's like sculpture or it is. We can, but seriously, I mean, it's that's a question for a different time. But it's just funny to me that artistry in general,
everything
is outside of our bounds. So
we're not slaves to the clock, Ceddie. We're not slaves to the clock.
We got two other questions.
Yeah.
What, have you thought about your answer? Go.
I've had plenty of time to think about my answer.
We've been over here listening to each other.
I've been listening. You guys said a lot of good stuff. Okay. Do you guys know who Jason Upton is?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Oh, country guy.
No, he's not country.
Oh, I'm thinking Jason Isbell.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I'm sorry. Who's I've heard that
Jason
name.
Upton. He's a Christian artist. He's like an indie Christian artist. And he came out with these two albums, A Table Full of Strangers, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Probably the greatest, like, 1-2 punch albums I've ever listened to in my entire life.
I've never heard you mention it.
It's high praise, man.
Yeah, he's probably my favorite Christian artist
Jason
of all time.
Upton.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is this guy right here.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But he's like an artist. You know what I mean? Like, you can be an artist, but like, he's an artist that artists look up to, you know, especially in the Christian space. And I think the reason why it was so influential to me is because, like, you know, I struggle a lot with anxiety and depression. And for some reason, whenever I get in those seasons, like, his music is the only thing that I want to run to. And so that tells me that there's something raw and real about it that I feel like I'm able to be vulnerable with and connect with, and just constantly. So there's that. And it's funny. One of the funny ones that came to my head was the Godfather, for like 1 and 2, for a weird reason, is because the whole time while I'm watching these 3-hour movies, I'm thinking about what does it really mean to be a man? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like,
that's good.
These guys are loyal, yet they're willing to do terrible things, and like you cannot cross them. And it was like interesting the amount of like integrity they had in some ways with what they believed
code
in,
and honor.
Yeah. And so I don't know, for me it was just like it caused me to question, it's like, what really makes a man? You know what I mean? Because then his marriage falls apart and all that stuff because of what he's involved in. And so it's like, so there you go.
Well, a lot of people do answer that question based off of The Godfather and Scarface, and and they use those as like these rules for life.
Yeah. Which I'm looking at it in a different way. It's like, why is this like not something that I want to be, or are there pieces of who these people are that I can take with me but maybe not. So
back to like Jason Upton real quick though, like, did you feel like you found those albums like at a particular point in your life that made it particularly like resonant for you, or it's just been like throughout your journey?
I think I don't know how I came across him. It's really weird because like I'm obviously a worship guy. If you're listening, you don't know I'm a worship director. And so like I was into worship music, and I would hear like worship artists talk about their influences, and they would mention Jason Upton. And so I looked him up, and I just started, and it was like right whenever I became a Christian, I think around like 2017, 2018, I started listening to him. And so, I mean, he really carried me through like a lot, some pretty rough seasons. And they're just excellently done. Simple instrumentation, beautiful words. Sometimes it's worshipful, sometimes it's just reflective and stuff like that. And it's raw and real. So
I'll check it out.
Yeah, bro, check it out, man. Jason Upton.
Yeah, that's awesome. So pieces of art that we've connected with deeply. I talked about this in our first episode, actually, when you asked me simply what my favorite movie was, and I shared way too much about Forrest Gump. But I love that movie for so many different reasons. In particular, the scene where Forrest is talking to Jenny that they used to sit on as kids after she's passed. And like the sun is setting, and he's talking to her about their son and how he's smart. And he's like, not like me, when he starts to cry. But the entire film that is building up to this point is like making you question who the smartest person actually is. Because he never overthinks, and he always does the right thing.
That's a good.
He's the kind of guy who, in every situation, is fully present to the people he's with. He never thinks twice about doing the right thing, and then he does it. And it takes him on this beautiful journey in life that is freer than any one that we experience, and fuller. And then at the end, it's like letting you into his heart in one of the few moments that it does that in the film. And I love that film for a ton of reasons, but because of that, because he doesn't overthink. I do. I'm a chronic overthinker. I'm always in my mind. I'm always thinking about stuff. And the freedom that Christ has given me to not be that way has changed my life, and he's grown me a ton in that. Now I'm nowhere close to mastering it. But I remember watching that film, and it just stirred up all those questions in me about what does it look like to really live how I'm called to live, and also what really matters most, because he doesn't seek, this ties a little bit back into our last episode as well. He doesn't seek glory ever. He just seeks doing the right thing, and that leads him along this journey that's so beautiful. So Yeah, I love Forrest Gump. I think it's done so beautifully. And there's so much to it. And even his faith, at one point he's singing in a choir. It's so good.
Yeah.
So good. But
it's been a long time since I've seen Forrest Gump. Yeah.
One of the scenes, okay, so one of the opening scenes, he's a kid, and him and Jenny, he goes over to Jenny's house, and she's abused as a kid. And they run out into this field, and she's running away from her dad, who's like yelling at her to come back. And she's literally just yelling. She's like yelling, and then he's yelling, and they find themselves in this field, and they just sit down and pray. She's like, we need to pray. And she says, God, would you make me a bird so I can fly far, far away from here? Because all she wants to do is to be able to escape. So their stories intertwined in such a beautiful way, because she is constantly going down this path of destruction, trying to run away from the hurt she experienced. And he is constantly trying to like protect her every step of the journey, as much as he knows about her. So it's really, really beautiful. There's so many elements of the faith journey in it that I love. So, but your question touches on, I think, a deeper subject, which is just our ability to really listen, and not just with our ears, but with our hearts as Christian people, and be in tune with the hunger that people have who aren't Christians for something greater than what they're settling for. And I love that about that, because films that are really successful will hit on that. Ones that really tug at your hearts, like your heartstrings. They touch the deeper parts of who you are, and they make you think about all of those different things. And so it's cool that Ryan Gosling can make a film about him and this peculiar object, and it can do those things,
Well, what you mentioned is very interesting, because art comes, the ability to creativity comes from God. Mm-hmm. And there are really cool books that I've read about God and film. And one of them showed me that every movie, every story is portraying some aspect of creation, fall, redemption, restoration. Mm-hmm. Each one shows something about that. So that's a really cool lens by which to view art. Mm-hmm. It all comes back to the gospel. I love Forrest Gump. It's one of my top 10 and was my favorite movie for so long. Jenny's story, for example, is similar to Lars, right? Where like she was a drug addict. She was a stripper at one point. She led a really hard life. And all along the way, people were judging her. None of those people knew what happened to her as a child. Yes. Right? Like Forrest did. Mm-hmm. And that's with anyone. That's the same thing, right? Even Joe Rogan says like that he views everyone as a child. Like people who are immature, who do bad things, like, oh, you're just a child that hasn't matured, hasn't grown up yet, mm-hmm. or is stuck in the past, which is a psychological concept too. But like my favorite character is one of my favorite stories in that movie is Lieutenant Dan. Yeah. Also, what an incredible redemptive arc in that guy's life through his encounter with Forrest and his compassion and his generosity and his love. And for some reason today, the line jumped into my head from Lieutenant Dan. It means nothing to this, but it's just, they gave you the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Dude, it was so today, as we were like romping around the Wexford campus of our church, it was thunderstorming like nobody's business. Mm-hmm. And I pictured I pictured Lieutenant Dan on top of the church. Just, is this all you got? Like that's, what I mean? Dude. It's so funny.
And that movie was groundbreaking with the special effects, dude, the use of green screen, adding him into interview, meetings with the president. Like, it was incredible. Groundbreaking movie, man. Yeah. Robert Zemeckis.
Yeah. It's good, man. I love it. So in light of all that, I think we can shift it on to the next one. Ced, would you like to go? Would you prefer if I
can go. It's kind of an interesting one. So Ephesians chapter 5, this is the verse that says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, and other things. And then 1 Corinthians 7:29 says, what I mean, brothers and sisters, is that time is short. From now on, those who have wives should live as if they do not. So my question is, do you think the Western culture idolizes marriage relationships too much? Or do you think that it's like we have it in an appropriate spot? I think that's the best way I could put it.
I think yes. I think we totally idolize marriage.
And then how? Because I love my wife dearly, you know, but I don't know. It's interesting to where I feel like some people can just be like, my marriage is like everything, in the same way where it's like, you know, my kids are everything or my job is everything. I don't know.
It totally makes sense. What you're saying makes sense. So I think it's important to set it up with God's original commandment to us is to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. So that takes partnership. So marriage is good and it's blessed by God. You know, it's something that He intends for us to do. Yeah. But not everybody, right? I mean, the Bible talks about for those who are willing to drink of the cup that is hard, it is better for them to stay unmarried and serve the Lord than to enter into it, because there are all kinds of strife that come whenever you do get married. Now, anybody who is married will tell you that's true. Anybody who is not married, right? But anybody who's not married to be like, what are you talking about? You're just being insensitive. It's like, just wait. And I adore my wife. Like, she is incredible. She's a gift from the Lord. But the reason why I say that is because I think people idolize not just marriage, but in particular, I think sex. I think in Christian circles, marriage is seen as the avenue to where we can have that dirty desire finally satisfied, and so we will.
If you burn, you know.
Yeah, better to right. If you burn, you better for you to marry, boy. Like, that's not. But that's the thing, right? People think that they're like, man, well, I'll tell you what, brother, I'm burning. You know what I mean? Right. That's their response. So honestly, I think people idolize marriage because, one, they think that it's going to be fulfilling to them, and it's not.
Yeah, right.
Marriage is a gift, but it takes hard work, and what's fulfilling is Christ, even when you're married. Like, and this is for people who are married and people who are unmarried. Also, sex does not fulfill you. It doesn't. Yeah. You know, and that's hard to hear when you're an unmarried person, because part of you deep down believes that it will, even if you say it. You say the words, you can know it in your head, but believing in your heart that sex will not fulfill you, and that even once you do it, you will be hungering for something. That's the reality. You know, I think a lot of people who save themselves for marriage, which is beautiful and what God calls them to do, they secretly believe internally that they'll be fulfilled when they save themselves and finally get to do it. Right. And they don't realize it's still hard and painful and difficult, you know? So I think people idolize marriage in a lot of ways, but that's one of them. And they think that it's a means to fulfillment, and that sex is a means to fulfillment. And all these different things are examples of us just lifting stuff up that's supposed to be only on the throne, or God's only supposed to be on the throne, and we put it in His place and worship it instead. But I definitely think so in our culture, you know?
I don't know. I'm still confused by the question. What do you mean?
Do you think people idolize marriage?
What people?
In general.
Idolize marriage?
Like,
give me.
So examples will be, say you're in that college age and you're just like, if only I could get married, and like fixating on that. Like, this is what God wants for me, like all this stuff. And then say if you are married, the idol of, I am so dependent on this person for my happiness and like for my joy and my fulfillment. So, does that help?
Or that they are responsible for providing those things to me. That like my spouse is the one who should make me happy. They should make me complete. They should make me fulfilled. They should give me purpose. Yeah. And I mean, to some degree, those things do come as a part of your marriage, but they come from Christ to you, and then like through you into them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not them as the source. Christ is the source, even when you're married. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, for me, to use your verbiage, if it's an idol, then it's bad.
I said, do you think people idolize?
Yeah. In the example that you gave of people thinking that marriage is going to give them a certain level of fulfillment apart from Christ, then yeah, that's an unhealthy idolatry and a misunderstanding, you know?
I just feel like, okay, in my opinion, I feel like Christian families, I don't know, sometimes it could just seem like marriage is like the pinnacle, you know, of like my Christian walk, is like my relationship with my wife, you know, and then some people, you know, with their kids. And I'm wondering, does it even seem like an issue to you? Like that's really the question. Does it seem like?
On the other hand of it, for me, I feel like people don't value it and honor it enough.
See, this is great. So it's like, that's the question. It's like, do you think people value it too much or not? You know?
Yeah, I feel like what I just, you know, what we talked about was like the unhealthy, you know, perspective, and you nailed it. Like college kids, for example, Sammy would tell me like, you know, ring before spring was a common sense. I'm sure at Liberty.
I had friends of mine get married like our freshman or sophomore year, and they lived in married dorms.
Yeah.
But then there's people who like overthink it, you know, and it's like just like we shared before, like, dude, she's a good Christian woman, like you know, marry her. But I think the Bible places it in its rightful place as of utmost importance, you know, and your wife as, you know, only secondary to Christ. I mean, even the language of like honor your wife, love your wife as Christ loves the church. This is interest. Like this is what I used when I asked for Sammy's hand in marriage with her dad, who is not really a Christian, you know, but he was like interrogating, you know, asking me questions about it. And I said,
interrogating me.
You know, one of the things I said, you know, like what kind of like trying to understand what type of husband I'm going to be and what type of man I am. I said, look, I'm a Christian and the Bible calls me to love my wife as Christ loves the church, and Christ laid his life down for the church. So I'm called to do the same thing. Like that's and then he like shed a tear. I was like, I got him.
Boom.
Gotcha, buddy.
Yeah.
But you know, but even to take it back, you know, to Genesis and the establishment of this union, this might be an unpopular opinion. I understand that, you know, Paul was single and that is a calling. I think it's a calling for few people. I think the majority of people have the ability and should pursue marriage, and then to honor God in light of that marriage, and then to be fruitful and have children and disciple them to follow and love the Lord. I believe that is the model for life that God created in Scripture, and that the Christian life is meant, again, with few exceptions, but it's meant to be done in family through that model. So, yeah, I think for me, I do think that some people do have that mentality and I did when I was younger. And then maybe I still am in danger of maybe idolizing it as well. Frankly, perhaps I'm sure someone maybe would look at my life and maybe make that judgment. But and part of it is because divorce has decimated my family. I mean, rampant throughout my entire family. So that's part of the reason why I waited because I was like, I don't want to get divorced. So I want to find the right, and so that created, you know, this like fear. And it was what God did was like, when I met Sammy, like I never felt that fear once, you know, and but some, you know, so that would explain. But I think more it's some of the discipling that I've received and mentors that we have, that I've seen them model biblical marriage and life that way, and parenting, and it's like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And it was so impactful that we were like, we want to do everything possible to emulate that and recreate that. but yeah, I mean, when I see it in scripture all over the Old Testament, and I feel like it is so important that, again, Christ compares his relationship to the church with that same language, and like we're headed to this marriage ceremony, and like he's the bridegroom and we're the bride, and it's all centered around this dynamic of this relationship and to becoming one, and how that also reflects the triune God. And so for me, it's extremely important. And then once you are married in a Christian marriage, it is not only through that, but mainly the vehicle, that the Lord uses for sanctification and for, maturity and growth and like learning all these things. And then with parenting, as you guys will
I'm
learn.
not saying, like, I'm not arguing the importance of marriage, right?
But just to answer your question is like, I feel like, just some people don't even hold it in
right. No,
as high regard, even,
that's the that's the interesting perspective. I think that's great because it's funny because you talk about divorce, and how the church their divorce rate is the exact same as the world's, right? And that's terrible. But like, what if part of the reason for the world and for the church that the divorce rate is so high is because we had such high expectations?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
When he was talking, that's what I... In the beginning, what I was going to say, I didn't want to cut you off, is I think what you're saying only points to the fact that Ceddie is right. Because I think people have such high expectations of what marriage is going to be like when it falls short, when it's not serving my ends, when I'm not satisfied, when this thing I anticipated filling me up, bringing contentment, this person who always promised to make me milkshakes when I need them and bring me and read bedtime stories. Like, dude, that's not real life, Right. And the only thing that brings real fulfillment is Christ and Christ alone. And so I think people have these high expectations. And people, that's what I mean. Like, it's the disordered loves thing, right? Where God has to be first. It has to be. Like, he is the one who's worthy of our praise. And so I think it only amplifies and draws attention to the reality you were talking about. The people definitely idolize marriage, and they anticipate it's going to be the thing that fills them up. And when it's not, they run from it. And then they look for whatever the other thing is. Maybe they'll try it like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, right? Because it was that person's fault. It can't be me. It can't be me. So it was them. So I'm just going to do it again. And right? Mm-hmm. That's what happens, And it's super sad. And there's so much brokenness that comes outside of that doesn't just impact the people getting divorced, everybody else too. And so I think also, yes, people idolize it, and people don't have a high enough view of it. Yeah. But weirdly enough, those things are both true at the same time. People idolize marriage and don't have a high enough view of it. But when you understand our relationship to God and him being our bridegroom, it gives you perspective, like you were saying, to learn what it really means to lay your life down as Christ did for the church. And if you don't have that in its proper place first, you will never be able to experience the kind of fulfillment or contentment God really desires you to inside your marriage. That is impossible. Yeah. It will always be outside your reach until you submit yourself to Christ and learn what it's like to be loved by him the right way first, right? So I think both things have to be taken into account.
Yeah, because marriage is, I think, our most important worldly relationship, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so like we need to take that very seriously. But it's also just like with anything, our jobs or whatever. It's like I'm going into this job because like this is the perfect fit for me. Mm-hmm. And this job is going to do everything that I want it to do. And once a coworker talks behind your back, then you're like, you know what? This sucks. I'm quitting. You know? And stuff like that. So yeah. Oh, interesting. That's good. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, that's good stuff said.
So, like, how do you think that we perpetuate a healthy view of marriage for, younger
doing it right? Doing it right.
Gotta do.
And that looks like being holy first. And holiness comes from, like, having God be your top priority and allowing your worship of him to invade every aspect of your life. When you are like everything you do is geared towards your love for him. And all the other stuff is training you towards righteousness. It is training you towards being the kind of person Christ calls you to be for the purpose of your love for him. Not to be a righteous person, but because you love him, it transforms every aspect of who you are for the right reason. And you experience the blessing God wants you to when you live the life he calls you to. And then people are drawn to that. But we don't have enough examples. And this is what we go back to with the same thing we talked about last time. We don't have enough examples. We have way too many people shouting axioms down from the rooftops about how to have the perfect Christian marriage. 10 steps to maintain a healthy Christian marriage. 10 steps to satisfy your spouse. And it's like
devotion.
It's, you know what I mean? And we're dropping that next week, by the way.
Yeah.
But we have these ideas, and we don't need more content. There's too much. We need examples. We need people who are willing to be disciplined enough in their relationship with Christ to really humble themselves in the way Christ calls us to. And I think that is the hardest part of marriage. I don't know about you guys, but for me, it has shown me how desperately prideful I am in every way and how selfish I am in everything that happens. And I'm always seeking to try to have what I want, when I want it, how I want it. And when things don't go that way, that's when I feel frustrated. And I can choose to act out of that frustration or act out of sacrificial love. But I think the way we fight against it is by providing examples of keeping the Lord first, keeping our spouse second, keeping our families next, and our career coming after that. And even inside the church, those priorities get mixed up. It's usually not God first, spouse second, or it's usually God is first and then it's like work, because I'm doing the Lord's work. So my kids can sacrifice, my marriage will sacrifice, we'll make it work. And there's just unhealthy boundaries galore. And you know what I mean?
Or even I think that one of the traps, that the church and Christians fall into is, that first thing of God being at the top gets mistaken for doing.
Yes, doing for God instead of being
service,
with God.
mission,
Yes,
evangelism.
totally.
And what we're talking about is oneness
Yes.
with the Lord, unity, communion with him, which you can only do by spending time with him every day. And I think it comes to mind because it's been on my mind. It's a struggle for me in certain aspects, but that's what I'm striving for. But as I look back at how, there's just, I feel like a lot of examples of people saying well, I have God first, but the relationship with God is actually very poor.
Yeah.
Because for them, healthy Christianity is about doing more and serving God more and doing, where, you don't even have time for your wife or for your family, right? Because you're doing so much. So.
Meanwhile, that's God's call for us,
right? Is
to spend time with him, spend time with them.
Yeah.
And that's, again, not that we get royalties from Pete Scazzaro, but he talks about that
Ceddie.
so much. He talks about how it's a defense mechanism, doing for God instead of being with him and enjoying his presence. And a lot of people think that they're succeeding in their relationship with God when they are ministering to the most amount of people and leading the most small groups and spending the most time, sacrifice. And God wants to be with us. That's how he designed us to be, to commune with him, And so he talks about this idea, using God to run from God. So we just constantly wind up doing for him. And it's a means of escape from the reality of what will come out if we just sit in silence before the Lord. And we are so uncomfortable in that space. But the more that we can do that and just understand what it's really like to be in his presence, to hear his voice, because he'll bring out the stuff that's in you, and it comes up percolating to the surface, and we just run from that space. We shift out of it, pull out our phones, pull out some kind of distraction, or we'll listen to worship music. We fill the space and the silence with something. But people all the time use God to run from God, by doing for him. So not doing that and allowing allowing all of your life to reflect your priorities properly. I think that's how we fight against it.
I think something I always think about is we're not the main character of our movies, of our stories. Yeah,
dude, I got that main character.
Yeah, I call it Harry Potter syndrome. Sometimes you think you're, because it's like, I'm the one, I'm the chosen one. And so you orient your life to, it's like, I'm the main character of my story and I will do things to, and then this also gets into the marriage part because everybody idolizes the one for me. And that totally comes from movies. And I don't know what everybody else thinks. I personally do not believe in the one. I believe in like a woman that is in your life that loves God, marry her. There could have been 10 others maybe down the road, who knows? But then you do everything in your power to make that work. Life isn't fair. Life isn't going to be perfect and all these things. And you can't idolize can't idolize those things. You know what I mean? And so,
well, yeah, it's important to say that like marriage is to serve the Lord, not to serve us. You know?
Yeah. Totally. That's super important. And even part of this we were talking about earlier is the sexual aspect of it. Marriage isn't about me. It's about them. Yeah. And when I make my marriage about me and what I'm getting, it will be awful. It will be a never-ending cycle of me having higher expectations than are realistic. And the same goes for having sex with your spouse. It is about them. It's about what can you do for them, right?
It's about making babies.
No, but like in your marriage, you want to be seeking to serve. How can I serve them? How can I lay myself down every time? That's the thought. And when it's not, we're in trouble. But that goes for every aspect of a relationship. And John Piper talks about that. He's like, when it comes to Christians in relationships and whenever it comes to like being together in the way that God designs a man and wife to be, he's like, it's about how you can please them. It's not about you. When you make it a selfish thing, you will ruin the gift God desired to give you. And it is all about laying yourself down and sacrificing. But that is hard.
Dude, my youth pastors would talk about sex because it was like a husband and wife team.
Golly, brother. Let me like a recipe for
let me break it down for you guys.
Let me break it down.
We have the best sex life.
For real.
It's the same. It's the same person who's like, everyone, look at my hot wife. Yeah,
babe, stand up. No, come on, stand up in the front. There she is.
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about our sex life.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's so tough, dude.
Yeah, that was something they did quite often.
Bro, we might be a PG-13 podcast, man.
Dude, this guy.
I know, coming out with the
just careless whisper starts playing in the back.
Anyway, we're an hour in.
Yeah, we're an hour
Jerry,
in.
take us home, man.
So, my question is short and sweet, and I can give backstory if necessary, but why are we so afraid of feedback? Why are we so afraid of feedback?
Ooh, I love feedback.
I know, but we don't invite it in the way that we should.
Hey, Juan, my feedback to you is you don't love feedback.
So, so here's the thing. A lot of people say that they love feedback, and I would say that I am one of them. I enjoy when people tell me and are honest with me what's really going on. But we communicate that, and yet often don't provide means for people to give it to us. So I'm open to feedback, and if anybody wants to, but I think in reality that's not the case. And so I know Jesus talks a lot about not judging others, and that's incredibly important, but also speaking the truth in love is another thing that he talks about, and his word is very clear about, and how we need to be intentional to be honest and figure out what the truth is with grace and love at the same time. So why do you think we're afraid, one, to give honest feedback, and two, why do you think we're afraid to receive it?
I'm going to take this in a direction I don't think you probably thought I would take it.
I'll take
One,
it
I think it's because the ratio of feedback to encouragement is off.
Nice.
You know, like I think people find it's so much harder to encourage people and actually say like if someone did a good job, you know how many times, like, say if our pastor gives a good sermon, which they always do, I've said good sermon like 4 times. You know what I mean? And stuff like that. Like, people will say nice things about me sometimes about like worship, but like I get way more feedback or ways that I can improve than I do encouragements that, I'm doing a great job, like meaningful ones. People think about the feedback they're going to be giving you. People don't really think about the encouragements you want to give to others. And like, I'm obviously talking to myself too, but like, it's just, yeah. So I think whenever you get more feedback, it's like, great, another thing I'm doing wrong, because people aren't filling up your encouragement tank as much. And I don't think people have a problem giving feedback at all. Like I know I don't. If you're doing something you're not supposed to do, like, bro, you hit that note wrong. Do better. Like, yeah. So there it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have several thoughts. One of them is my own relationship with feedback, which is I'm more distrusting of positive feedback.
Yeah,
like I feel like people are like flattering me, and
like encouragements or.
Well, yeah, like even not necessarily, maybe even encouragement. Not so much encouragement.
That be the definition of encouragement? Positive feedback?
Positive, encouraging.
I mean, I would prefer it to be more specific to like what I'm doing. That in there. Yeah, right. As far as feedback, like something that's more direct and specific to like what I'm doing. So, like, I do production at the church. So if there are people that are like, hey, I like this about what you did, or and then there are other people that are like, it's too bright, it's too loud, which is feedback, but not always super helpful except to express your preference. But yeah, like preaching, for example, like when I preach, someone saying good sermon, I don't know how to take it because I'm like, were you listening? Like,
well, that's the intentional encouragement. You know what I mean? Where if you actually, if someone intently listened to your sermon, and they would say, when you made this point about this, it totally resonated with me. Yeah. You know what I mean? Instead of just like, hey, good sermon, chap. Yeah. You know?
Like I think feedback.
Good on you, buddy.
I love the accents that just show up out of nowhere.
That's my bad.
In the course of this,
it's getting late.
It's all right. It's okay.
I would say like my favorite feedback is like, let's just talk. That sparks a conversation about this or that, But then I think too, like just to your point, I feel like part of it is because the proper vehicle for feedback, whether positive or negative, is like relationship.
Yeah.
Because there's comfort and like safety and security, which dictates honesty, right? And like if I know like you love me, you care for me, then I know you have no problem, being honest with me. And I think I receive that feedback a lot more in a more impactful way than like any other.
That's helpful. The reason I ask is because I find in conversations with people sometimes it feels like they're not being honest, and that they will say a lot of words but not what they mean. And I just can't stand that. I want people to tell me what they mean and not a bunch of words that talk around what they're trying to say. Because it is immensely helpful when people who you love, and that's the right context for it, right? With people who you actually have a relationship with, we'll talk around issues sometimes. I think it probably stems from the fact that they're afraid that we're going to get hurt, which maybe speaks more to our own sensitivity and insecurity than their willingness to share. But that's a hard thing for me sometimes, because I think we're really, really afraid to offend people, and that makes sense. But also, at the same time, it's got to be in love. We got to do it the right way. But I also think we could just go to say what we mean more often, and not just like heap up a ton of words for no reason. Like we can just say something and let it sit, and it's fine. Like, hey, I thought this was really good when you did that. I loved this part about it. Or, hey, like, I disagree with this thing that you said, instead of like trying to, you know, paint this whole picture about just being like, I actually disagree with that, you know? I think it's maybe more in the vein of honesty, and like conflict is a part of it to me. Why we're afraid of conflict and why we won't engage in it, and why we're way more comfortable dragging people when they're not in the room, and then we will just shiver in front of them when we're trying to communicate whatever we're actually trying to say, instead of just confidently approaching the people that are in our lives and telling them the truth, you know? And that's where this comes from for me, because situations where I'm in rooms of people and someone is getting talked about who is not there in ways that are expressly negative, it makes me want to leave. And it also makes me want to be like, what are you doing? Like, do you not, like, I get you're mad. Go talk to them. None of us can do anything about this.
Yeah, right.
You know? Don't tell me you're venting. Oh my gosh, the venting thing.
Venting.
My goodness, I'm just venting. I need to get it off my heart. No, you don't. No, you want someone who won't say anything to just listen, and you can complain about a person or a situation. And sometimes you have to share honestly, but like how you do it, even in those moments, is important. But talking to the people who can control the thing, I think is really important. And I think as people in positions of leadership, it's important for us to invite that from people, and to go out of our way to be like, hey, I really care about your opinion, and I want you to tell me the things that you think maybe I'm doing that might not be what the Lord wants me to do. Or like provide creative ideas. If you think something isn't going well, could you share that with me? Could you be honest with me about it? I think we have to go out of our way to invite it, because people won't just give it to us oftentimes, unless it's the kind of people who just love giving feedback. And there are those people too who are like, well, that sucked.
Yeah, right.
What were you thinking, dummy? You know,
Yeah,
like
right.
there's those people who come in and they're like, okay, so I've been here once, but based upon the things that I've seen, here's your SWOT analysis. And so here's your strength. And I'm like, I actually want to listen to you not at all, because you think you know everything that's wrong and you actually don't even know me, you know? And so I'm really not inclined to take feedback from people who have no clue who I am or what I do day in and day out. Maybe that has to do with my pride.
Well,
but does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know?
And I think one thing for me is, like, to be honest, there's some topics where you just know this could cut somebody more than others, where like this might hurt them at the core of like how they project themselves to be, you know? And people are combative. People do not like take, like, sometimes people could get really upset even with like.
Why do you think that is?
Dude, I mean, That's a good question. I'd have to sit on it for a little bit.
Why?
Yes.
Like easily combat. Like honestly,
yeah,
for
like
me,
flip of a switch.
Yeah, right.
It's fine. And then if I will bring up this and not
even in a nice way.
Yes, not calling out your character. Just, hey, I didn't think that went the way that we wanted it to. It will be like I am so viscerally mad that I like who Christ has called me to be is back there, and who's in the room is somebody else.
So I think there's a difference between the types of feedback that I might be talking about. So very practical feedback is like, you know, hey, you could have tuned up this part of your sermon. People take that feedback pretty well, you know. But I'm more talking about like, hey, man, like you really, I don't know, are. Like whenever you talk to people, you're just sounding very prideful. You're making conversations all about you, you know, and stuff like that. Like that hits people like on a deeper level, spiritual level. And that's where it's like, no, I don't. Like, what do you mean? Or like, bro, you just, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think of an examples. I'm not talking about you guys, but it's like, bro, you talk way too much or something like that. Yeah. Or like parts of your personality, you know, instead of like, the actions that does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah, where like people can get very combative about stuff like that and become very insecure, at least in my experience. So I typically refrain from that, knowing that it's probably going to turn into a bigger conversation if I mention it, especially with wife or something like that, you know. But
would you consider giving someone feedback who didn't ask for it the same as giving someone unsolicited advice?
Yes, I would. And that's why I don't just give feedback to people who I don't know. Like, I don't do that. I won't just like roll in and be like, hey, you should do this differently. Now, maybe I should. But to me, that comes off as immensely prideful, and that's maybe because I'm projecting my own. But people come and give unsolicited feedback. It's hard. Yet, I think about it in this perspective, right? If you're like, say, any one of us is the lead pastor of a church, the bulk of the feedback you're going to get is unsolicited from people you don't know. And yet, wouldn't it be wise to listen to the things they're saying and consider them and not brush them off? I mean, this is something that our lead pastor was talking about today. Like, sometimes I need to pay attention to those things and consider them. Now, I could choose to get hurt by them, but I could also choose to grow through them.
But again, do the encouragements like equal or outweigh the amount of feedback that they're getting? I heavily doubt it.
Certainly don't think so.
So like at some point you're just like, no, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of hearing like all the things I'm doing wrong. And it's
no, that makes sense.
It's so discouraging, you know? Like I experience it where it's like I'll get like one compliment, like real compliment a week compared to 50 things that I've done wrong, you know? So like it just gets frustrating after a point. It's just like, just stop. I don't care what you're gonna say. Like, just don't. You know.
So when do you think it is the right time to give, if ever, unsolicited advice / feedback to people you don't really know?
If you have a relationship with them, I feel like whenever. But I'm because I think I do that. I give a lot of unsolicited advice. Recently, I thought about it and I was like, I should not do that. Like, I should give advice. Like, if someone asks me for my opinion or something, it's always well-meaning, but I don't know. I don't want to.
Dude, I don't know. There was a time when I love my job a ton. There was a time when I was struggling, not with considering whether I want to do this anymore or not, but I was just struggling with the state of where things were in our ministry. And you gave me unsolicited advice, and then you prayed for me, and I wept, and it was exactly what the Lord wanted me to hear. And so there are times like that where I think, you know, it has been immensely helpful in my life sometimes where you did that for me, and I wouldn't trade it in for the world. Like, I love that you did that because you were willing to share honestly your thoughts from your experience and then pray for me in a way that really changed where I was at. And so, I don't know.
I think advice could be different. Where you're literally just telling somebody, it's like, hey, you're in this situation. Everybody knows you're in this situation right now. This is what I did when I was in this situation, and it really helped me. Yeah. That's not like, hey, you did this wrong. This is what you should do instead. It's like, this is what happened to me. You know, I know you're going through this time, but this is, I did the same thing, and this is how I got out of it. You know, that's what a sermon is too, where it's like you're just giving people guidance in some sort of way, but you're not giving like feedback, you know?
I would say, yeah, I think that's really helpful, that distinction between advice and feedback, because it makes me ask the question, like, how much should we like crave feedback, you know? Because sometimes you can be needy, not you. Like, people can be needy for feedback and for
encouragement,
affirmation.
Oh, yeah, you feel like they're fishing for it.
Yes.
Oh, it's the worst. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. When it feels like people are baiting you. When it feels like people are baiting you, they're like, how did you think it went? And you're like, they're like, was it good? And you're like, what do you want me to say right now? You know, like, it doesn't seem like, good sermon, chap.
Good Simon, chap.
I think ultimately for me, after this discussion, I would say that for me, feedback specifically is like all about the relationship. Or if someone just asks me for their feedback and we don't have much of a relationship, But I also think like people are like very consumed by their self-image, and that plays into if they give feedback or not.
Yeah.
Because they'll consider how it's going to make you feel about them or how you're going to respond to it, you know? So.
I think that, because I'll be honest, like I talked about earlier, my brain's always rolling. And I got a lot of feedback for a lot of people, and they don't know it.
He's got a notebook.
No, dude.
Oh, we know.
I'll tell you what. But like, no, for real. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I got some Word docs up there. I mean, but seriously, I got stuff stored up where I'm like, is it my business to say this to them? But to people who I don't necessarily have a relationship with, but I can watch from a distance, you know? But like, so here's the thing. Am I being judgmental? Or also, you know, is that like something that at some point I should prayerfully consider sharing with them? Because like you were saying, I have this feedback for you, and I think it's really valuable and it would help a lot. And yet I'm also afraid of the way that your view of me will be diminished and never be the same. Maybe I'll have less opportunities in my career going forward because I was willing to say whatever it is. You know what I mean? And that's the thing that I think is tough. And it goes back to with what you were saying, where people are really sensitive sometimes, which makes sense. I get that about specific areas. But sometimes those areas we're most sensitive in are areas we need the most, like, wisdom and not like necessarily feedback, but we need people to speak into our lives in them and be willing to be honest with us about it, because it'll actually bring change, you know? Because oftentimes those parts of us that are the most wounded or sensitive, we need someone to like come in and help us see that there's healing available in Christ and to find freedom from it, and to know that they see it too, and they don't think less of us because of it, but they can help us find freedom, you know? And so I think we need to be more willing to invite people into those spaces, you know? But it's like, on the other hand, if they don't handle it well when you do say that, you could be just in a pretty tough position, because you said the thing, you managed to be honest in the way Christ calls you to be, and you were doing it out of love, and now you're just floating in this weird relational tension because they flipped the switch on you. And
then you can, there's also the point where you could think like, maybe I just think too highly of myself where my feedback matters that much.
Yeah.
You know,
it's
like,
real.
There's that. And I was looking up the verse in James about like taming the tongue.
Yes.
If you can tame the tongue, I mean, you can tame anything. You can tame your heart and your mind, and like how important it is to show the discipline of restraint in certain situations, because of how important that is. Because it says here, it's like, consider what a great, like a forest can be set on fire by such a small spark, right? And same with the tongue. And so it's like really considering the words that we use, you know, is it really that important for me to tell Todd that his breath stinks?
Dude, that's really convicting. Like, do I think that my feedback is really that worth hearing for them?
Mm-hmm. Like, out of all the people that could give feedback, like yours is yours is the most important.
I just think it does require. This is a great point, because it brings to mind that like it does require tact and discernment sometimes. Like, I got this relative. You know, you got these people that, like, if you were honest, you would just tell them, like, it's very simple. Here's what you're doing wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
Stop chasing girls that don't go to church. You know?
Yeah.
Come on.
Like, if you...
Somebody!
But like you
witness.
know that just telling them they're not going to take it well,
Right, yep.
It's going to be a fight. So, like, you nurture that relationship, you know, when they break up again, you're like, oh, it's, you know, and geek. So
I've had this exact situation. It's hilarious.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like that
didn't work.
in that situation, I just know it would not be helpful for me to tell you what I really think.
Yeah, certainly.
You know?
Time
So
is,
it just brings to mind like relationship matters, and then just tact and discernment, you know, because it could be received well, and I mean, it could be received poorly. and then just create conflict and a whole can of worms.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. I appreciate it. I got a bunch of feedback I'm about to go spout off to people.
Dude,
so
come
can we wrap
on
this
now. Yeah.
Dude,
I'm about to make a bunch of phone calls
I'm about
here.
to be shooting off texts, audio messages left and right.
he's got these journals that are like month to month.
Yeah.
Now I know what he's filling them up with.
It's just
Interesting.
today.
Yeah.
Juan.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really funny.
Good stuff,
Good
guys.
stuff. Yeah, guys, I appreciate you being willing to take some time, sit down, talk these things out.
I appreciate you being willing to take some time.
I really love you, man.
Dude, I love
Thank you. I
too.
thought you did such an awesome job this time.
I'm over here.
When
Dude.
we did this
Hey,
podcast.
me too.
I thought you did. You could do some work, but
I got some feedback. I got some
notes for you.
Thanks, man.
Anyway, yeah, guys, thanks so much. And for those of you who are listening, guys, thanks so much for joining us again on another episode of the Upside Down Podcast. And Juan,
Well, I got something to say.
Juan's got something
You
to say.
better make it quick, man.
Yes, it's very quick. Thank you for watching. Just really want to ask if it would really help us out. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. If you could leave us a comment, that helps us a lot. And again, I mean, I want to be honest. Like, if you have received something positive from the podcast, right? If you've been encouraged by it, or if you like it, like, share it. And it's not just about being known, if it is something good and beneficial, like that could benefit other people, then that would be great. Is just getting it out there, and it also just helps us out. So just want to make that request. Yes, it's just those are ways in which we would really appreciate your support.
Yeah.
Right.
Good
Smash.
stuff. Smash. Destroy that like button.
Yeah, and leave some of your own questions in the comments.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
give us inspiration for things we can bring to the table.
There is
whether
no
it's
guarantee we will do that.
no, there's not, but there is potential. So if you have some kind of question that you've come up with in your walk with Christ, or something you're navigating, something that might be able to make its way onto the podcast. So thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you guys next time.
Peace.